So without further ado, a very warm welcome to the show, Savio. Amazing to have you here.
Sally, really glad to be here to talk with you and help some of your listeners understand what IBM's doing in the space with developers, open source, and AI.
Oh, fantastic. Such a shared passion and kind of my background too, to an extent as well. I'm sure we'll get into that fantastic stuff. And perhaps a great place to start, a little bit more about you and your role at IBM. I think great to kind of know more about the person behind the tech, if you will.
Yeah, so my role is I lead what's called Ecosystem Engineering and Developer Advocacy at IBM. And at the end of the day, this is about a few things. It starts with the developer. So it's all about making the developer successful, helping him or her with their skills. It's focused very much on that. And those developers can be white space developers. They can be developers at our ecosystem partners like ISVs, system integrators, and so forth. So we want to make them successful. That's number one. Number two, we want to help drive the adoption of IBM technology. And the more skills that there are with IBM technology, the easier that is. And then number three, my team is very focused on the open source community and how do we drive innovation in the open source? So it's not just solely about IBM because we want the industry to benefit. So when we talk more about Watsonx, that's just another instance of how we are using open source to benefit the industry, but also underpin IBM products. So that's in a nutshell what my team does. In terms of myself, 24 years at IBM here.
Brilliant. Love that. Fantastic. And thank you. Kind of three pillars of your activities there, as I was talking about earlier. I love that already. Fantastic stuff. And in terms of this evolution, in terms of the developer space, but also the power of the ecosystem, so important. You mentioned already there about open source as well and how you're working with these communities. I'd love to kind of bring to the fore the trajectory here as well, because this isn't something new for IBM. I've been really involved in this for a number of years, and I've loved the fact this is a long-term commitment that's evolving incrementally bit by bit. So this is really is a powerful trajectory. So perhaps we could drill into that, but how this has evolved, where you've started from in terms of working with developers and open source communities, and where you are now and where this is heading, because ecosystem totally to the fore here.
Well, Sally, you hit the nail on the head, right? This is not new for IBM, right? We've been thinking about developers and making developers successful, and that developers are very critical in terms of technology decisions before that became the cool thing to say. Right. So if you go back to Linux or Apache or Eclipse, those are open source projects that IBM invested significantly in to make the project successful. And then, of course, we built technologies on top of those projects. Now, that continues here. And one of the things that we're focused now is we know that developers are critical in new technology decisions. And when you think about what's new, hybrid, AI, quantum. Hybrid, AI, quantum. Now, we've done a lot of work in terms of the open source technologies that underpin hybrid products, for instance, Kubernetes. And now we're starting to see that there's a huge momentum in the open source projects related to AI, whether it's Ray, PyTorch, KKit, the Hugging Face community itself, Presto, Iceberg. So all of that, those are great projects that IBM is investing our time and effort in to make the project successful. Then we take the capabilities we're invested in there and make them part of IBM products. And we feel that that helps in terms of driving innovation for developers, which that's what they care about. And it also helps when their managers are looking at products and saying, wait, am I getting locked in? And with an open source base, you're not getting locked in. And that's something we feel is very important. So I would say that there hasn't been a major shift in terms of IBM's thinking about the importance of developers and open source and educating developers on open source technologies, because we've been doing this for 25, 30 years. The shift I would say now is much more focused on which open source projects, because look, there are tens of thousands of open source projects out there. And so we can't spread our team across tens of thousands of open source projects. So we focused on hybrid, AI, and quantum. And we feel, the hybrid is getting very mature. AI is at the early maturity and lots of innovation happening. And quantum, it's early maturity, but the conversations we're all having about AI today, we're going to have those about quantum in the next 2 to 3 years. And we are investing now with our open source developers in those communities so that when 2 to 3 years comes, we've already established a great community that developers can rely on. The other thing that I think I'd say has changed a little bit is the role of education. If you go back to the days of Linux, Apache, Eclipse, IBM and many of our peers did work in the open source communities. And that was one key aspect. Now what you're starting to see, especially from the likes of IBM, is education around those projects. Because the set of developers that are going to go and contribute to an open source project, there's a large group there. But the set of folks that are going to use those open source projects, not contribute, use them, and need some education and guidance on best practice and so forth, that is much, much larger. And that's why you've seen our focus on education. And we'll talk a little bit about that with what we're doing on generative AI.
Love that. Absolutely. It's so important. And in terms of that education piece in particular, I think that's one of the things that's resonating in terms of questions certainly I get in terms of, this is not just a tech question. This is around skilling and upskilling. It's around culture. It's around process. And it's also about enabling skills to people who maybe aren't in a traditional tech facing role. But obviously every role has quite an element today really of tech and data, but really is that extending that outreach and that democratization of access to skills, I think, is huge. And you've done a lot around this area. Absolutely right. And I love that. And in fact, one of the things I'd love to talk about is some of the new courses that you've announced too. And I love the way not only the new training that's coming out, but also kind of the ripple effect of making it more accessible to greater audiences, for example, particularly in the partner community. But I think that's so powerful. Perhaps we could talk about that. For example, the generative AI courses that have just been launched as well, and some of the related courses there. Can you tell us some kind of what's happened there, the latest take and where this is going? But for me, kind of democratization of access is right up there with this.
So you're bang on again. So courses are great. The democratization is even better. And so while the team is called Developer Advocacy, I have to remind folks that developer stands for many, many things. 20 years ago, developer meant I'm a programmer, right? And maybe I'm a procedural programmer. Today, I might be a business analyst. I might be a data scientist. I might actually be a CHRO, chief of HR. And I need to understand how can I use generative AI in my job. So when we think about our audience, it's not just developers anymore. So the new courses that have come out, they're focused on the broadest set of learners, many of which will be technologists, some of which will be line of business leaders like a CHRO. And so we have content for those folks, of course, different content. Now, one thing that we've done very different here is that we think we want to meet you where you are. So if you're interested in generative AI, you're probably searching for courses about generative AI, or you're searching for generative AI in HR. So our courses start with where you are and are focused on teaching you a set of skills that we think will help differentiate you. Ideally, I want you to learn about IBM product. But if I just start with product, we're going to miss a large portion of the market because they're interested in their own skills and how they're going to differentiate. So that's why we start with their skills. So things like the NLP transformations with Hugging Face. There's no IBM product mentioned there. Or create a chatbot with open source LLMs. No IBM product mentioned there. But those are two key courses that we're seeing a lot of traction because they're tasks that people want to learn something about, right? And so we start there. And now many of the courses that we're building, they will evolve into courses that end up on learning sites like Coursera and edX. But we want to give the largest set of learners the tailored education they need for the skills they want. I did not mention IBM there at all.
So true. And I think that personalization around skills is massively important too. And I think we're seeing a journey towards that, within organizations of all sizes, different learning styles, but also, I kind of call it the rise of the generalist in the fact that, for example, technical skills really, really important, but we need that broader skill set to be able to adapt to all the different change that we're experiencing too. So that's what I also love about your course content. You've got very specific discipline related, whether it's Gen AI or some of the other aspects around open source technology as well. But you've got very specific areas there, obviously Watsonx too, but you've also got support with the more rounded skills as well. So for me, it's not just about the access to the skill, but it's also the confidence to apply them too. So I love the fact that you're supporting with other programs too, for example, the Startup Accelerator that I've been involved in. There's so many ways here that are looking at skills uplift holistically. I think that's a real massive bonus too.
Absolutely.
Fantastic, Savio. I love that. So looking at holistic skills development we've been talking about there, and I mentioned up front there about democratization of access. Could you just share a little bit more about how people can get involved in this from different audiences? Because again, whether you're an IBM partner or perhaps a student or a client in your ecosystem, I think there's different ways to get involved, and perhaps we could share that a little bit with the audience too.
Yeah. So Sally, whether you're in any of those audiences or even a line of business leader, all of these courses are free. Right, so they start with your skills. There's no barrier to entry in terms of adoption. There's no price associated with them. Now, some of the skills that we're teaching will be more effective and more targeted to you if you're a ISV developer that's looking at how can AI help differentiate features within my existing product, right? And that's what we call the build motion at IBM. So we have a targeted set of courses there. Or if you're a system integrator developer and you're, again, thinking about how can genai help the solution I've built that I use with my end customers, targeted set of education there. But there's also for the masses, because again, we think that genai is going to be something that everybody needs to know a little bit about, regardless of, hey, look, I'm a COBOL person. Doesn't matter. You're going to need to know something about genai because it's going to impact your work. And so we want to make sure that there's the breadth and the depth here. And one of the things that we think we've done very differently than some of our peers, the education material is very high content. And the reason I feel very confident saying that is this is the same team that builds content that then lands on education providers like Coursera, edX, and so forth as for-fee offerings. And those offerings have been used by, I believe it's over 8 million learners. So we know that the content is good. The creators of the content know how to build education for learners in different categories. That's who we asked to build this content on genai. I looked at I actually tried to go through some of the education with some of our peers in the industry, and you could see that this was thrown together very quickly. And I understand that because, look, the market for genai is moving so rapidly. However, what we don't want to do is get millions of developers using our courses and they get stuck. Or they realize, look, hey, there's something missing between step 4 and step 5. There really should have been a 4B. We've built the courses with the professionals that have done this for 8 million learners. Then we've taken these courses through people that haven't gone through the course to see, does this make sense? Did you get stuck anywhere? So we really care about the quality of the experience. Number 2, it's all about skills focus. So if you look at some of the offerings from our peers, it's learn about vendor product X. I don't want to teach you about vendor product X because you don't actually want to know about vendor product X right now. It's too early in the market. You want to learn about a generalist skill like prompt engineering or LLMs or how to use PyTorch to do a visual recognition. So we want to meet you where you are as a developer / practitioner. And I think the third big difference here is around our focus of expanding the aperture to people that wouldn't have been called developers in the past, including line of business folks, right? Because they also need to understand, wait, how could I change my contact center operations with AI? Now, maybe somebody in their IT team should be helping with that conversation, but isn't it better if when their IT team comes to them, they have some base education and can have a constructive conversation with their IT peers? That's what we think we can absolutely help with here.
I think that's so true. It's so important in terms of kind of reducing miscommunication and ambiguity. And at the end of the day, they're building things that don't actually align to what the purpose really should be, because there's misunderstandings that have got in the way, or there's duplication or complexity or sprawl, all these other things that can negate on the outcomes. I think you're absolutely bang on it in bringing that to the fore. I think that's absolutely key. So I love that. And I love the content curation around that training that you brought to the fore there, because it makes all the difference in the world. And actually some new research that came out just the other day was talking that when people are working with different organizations, this quality of the skills support that's available is actually a massive kind of indicator of propensity to stay, to leave, to build that relationship of trust. Whether you're an employee or a potential customer, or like I got another client around the ecosystem, for example, but it's massively important. I think the skills element has never kind of rided so high in terms of a characteristic that makes a massive difference to people. So I love the fact you've done that with such care and curation. You really brought that to the forward. It's a massive difference maker today. It really, really is.
We feel so thank you for saying that.
Oh, pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And actually just thinking about that too, in terms of some of the other areas that you're working on, some of the news around your embeddable AI software portfolio, again, something I've been very, very interested in, but I also think that has a powerful role to play around skills as well. For example, about supporting companies better address things like the AI skills gap, resource challenges, talent gaps, etc. as well. So I think that also fits into that support across technology, but also education too.
Absolutely, Sally. And so we've got our embeddable AI library, and also you've probably heard all the news around Watsonx. So we look at that as yes, exactly. So we look at both of those as our AI set of products, and in both cases, it's as easy as calling an API.
Yes.
Right. And so the barrier to entry here for developers that are looking to improve their products with IBM's AI is very, very low. And so you've got that capability. Now you can also go all the way up to working with SDKs, doing prompt tuning in the prompt lab and so forth. So we have that breadth of education provided here. And when you think about the embeddable AI libraries or even Watsonx, I want to circle back to something that we started with, right? One of the roles of my team is evolving open source communities and the open source project. So if you look at Watsonx, the foundation of the product is very, very much open source, right? PyTorch, KKit, Hugging Face supported, Iceberg, Presto. We feel it's critical in terms of helping developers, but really also helping her or his manager feel comfortable with the technology choice, that they're not getting locked in. And so you have that transparency of what technology am I really betting on here, right? You're betting on IBM, but what technology are you betting under the covers? And we spend a lot of our time with the open source community. We have folks on the team that their day job is go work in Presto. Their day job is work in the PyTorch community, and then drive innovation there and take that innovation to help craft the courses that we're going to create, or help craft the enablement we make available to our partners and to our clients and to end developers. So we see this as a very strong cycle between the investments we make in open source to the work that we have to do from an education standpoint. We can't really do one without the other.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a virtuous feedback loop, what you were describing there, isn't it? It's really interesting.
Absolutely.
And funnily enough, I was speaking to one of the developers who'd been through Call to Code through the university outreach aspect, because obviously it's got these different categories, hasn't it? And they've been involved for 3 years. And one of the things that came to the fore, speaking to them about their experience there, was the skills uplift, the skills confidence, but also the power of the community that was coming together to support this as well. And the access to kind of the latest technology, supporting their growth from a personal development point of view, but their career and ultimately the team that they were involved in. The ripple effect of this was really, really exciting to see and incredibly tangible. So that massively came to the fore in just a recent conversation about this.
That's really great to hear, Sally. So I think you know, but your audience might not know. So Call for Code launched back in 2018. We've reached over 500,000 developers that are using technology to serve humanity, right? So a tech for good experience. And as part of that, the developers are learning, right? So this is about skills. So it's, they're learning new skills and they're solving problems that matter for the world. Now, in terms of the skills that they're learning, the same team that created the GenAI education that I've mentioned here, they're the ones that are creating the education for the other products that the Call for Code team would be, or Call for Code developers would be using. And when we focused this year, at the beginning of the year, the 2 technology areas we wanted the projects to look at were sustainability and AI. Now, we've evolved the AI piece to be generative AI now because there's so much interest. And when there's interest, we want to drive education, especially with the university folks that are part of Call for Code. So you'll see that some of the winning teams, and I won't give too much away, the most recent winner did exactly that. It's about how do I do something in the sustainability piece with generative AI. And we think we're going to see a lot more of that for the remainder of the year and then for 2024 as we think forward with Call for Code. But we've been really excited about the tangible benefits we've been able to drive in the open community, because all the Call for Code projects are released as open source. And whether you're talking about Aggerly, Project Owl, GardenMate, some of the winners in the past that you can learn more about on the Call for Code website. But those projects led to new innovation and new skills. And many of the teams that did, well, most of the teams didn't win, right? Because we only have 3 winners, but they all got something out of it. They got new skills. And we think that's incredibly important. So when we look at skills, sometimes it's through things like Call for Code. Sometimes it's through programs like the GenAI education that's available on IBM Developer, right? Sometimes we know that you as a developer, you might sit at an enterprise or an ecosystem and your ecosystem partner and your enterprise has purchased a Coursera subscription. Well, we want to make sure that when you're going through your enterprise Coursera and you're trying to learn something about generative AI, you're learning via us. So that's why we take some of our courses and make them available in those enterprise learning catalog providers.
I love that. And I think Call for Code is, again, that's something I've been involved in, I think 4 or 5 years now in various capacities. And again, on the Tomorrow's Tech Today YouTube site as well, we've got a lot of videos around this as well. In fact, a friend of mine was on one of the winning teams for Battery Spotter in iteration 2 this year as well. So very involved in that, and I absolutely loved it. I wanted to segue to that quite naturally because it is such an amazing example of that broad and outreach. And again, I love the fact there are kind of prizes in all sizes, if you see what I mean, and it's reflecting different types of audiences. Some teams have come together for the very first time, different levels of experience. There's something for everyone. But also, one of my big things about Call for Code is, actually, do you know what? You don't have to be a coder to take part either. It's valuing all different types of skills that make up a team, and that creativity and different things like, empathy, emotional intelligence, but that ability to and desire to make a difference in the world. There's something for everyone here, and you can form these teams very agilely and get loads of support, mentoring, and access to technology as well. And it's just an amazingly brilliant, powerful thing that I absolutely love. So yeah, fantastic, real credit that particular program is just amazing. And again, also I think a ripple effect. I think I mentioned this earlier, but in terms of supporting investments in initiatives like this, the ripple effect is huge. The developers that you're working with here, at the end of the day, they'll probably be the new employees of your partners and clients in the future as well, given the need for skills in this area. And also, just looking at Gen Z in particular, or Gen Z, they're looking for roles with purpose, and the opportunity to potentially onboard people through this, where you're showing the ability for data and tech to genuinely be applied for good. And some of those projects you've mentioned, I've seen how they've continued. They don't stop when the event stops. They continue and they get supported, and they become something that is given to the world and makes a difference. So it's an amazing project. It really is. Program, sorry.
Sally, that's a great point you brought up, because we run essentially local programs of Call for Code for our ecosystem partners and our clients. And one of our largest partners does exactly what you just described. Use this as a way of talent retention and talent growth. So absolutely. And when we look at Call for Code this year, we've split it into 3 streams: one for students, one for ISV startups, and third one is for enterprises. And that is specifically to your point of, let's use this as a way to keep people engaged, learn new things, and feel better about the work that they're delivering. Because as you mentioned, for Gen Z, there is that aspect of, am I driving social good with meaningful outcomes with my work?
Exactly. And again, the access to that bleeding edge technology alongside personalized support and training and technical experts, etc., is really powerful as well. We mentioned the embedded AI portfolio earlier. Could you just do a little bit more about Watsonx as well? Obviously, massive press release about this quite recently as well. But again, that's one of the things you get access to in terms of cutting edge technology as being part of the Call for Code potentially too. So it's an amazing opportunity.
Absolutely. And so Watsonx, at a very high level, there are 3 key products within Watsonx. There's watsonx.ai, watsonx.data, and watsonx.governance. So think of that as the platform. And then on top of that, there are applications that use watsonx capabilities. So Watson Assistant, Watson Orchestrate, Watson Code Assist. So think of it as a platform and products on top. Now, in terms of the platform itself, watsonx.ai product is really a modern studio for training, tuning, deploying AI models. And that's also where you get the models that IBM has built. Now, you can use IBM's models. You can use models from Hugging Face that IBM has curated and feel, got the right license, the right copyrights, or you can bring your own models. All of that is in .ai. Watsonx.data is a modern lakehouse. So whether you have structured or unstructured data, on premises, on cloud, you want to use your open data formats and open engines, all of that is supported with .data. And then watsonx.governance is just that. Think about your governance lifecycle from the time that you start envisioning as a business owner, I need a model to do banana, to the time you retire it. There's a whole process in there, and there needs to be checks and balances. And with foundation models, what we're seeing is that there will be lots of models created in a company. That's great, but it also brings a lot of risk. So think of it this. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and let's pretend that one of the foundation models was trained with information about a set of people's schooling education, right? At what level they went to. And then the Canadian government comes out sometime in the future and says, you cannot have AI that distinguishes a person based on their education. So now, what if I'm a business owner that has a fine-tuned model over here that is taking advantage of a base foundation model that started with that training set of education? How will I know? Right. And by the way, if I don't know, I'm probably exposing my company to a lot of financial risk. If you look at in the EU, it's 20 million or 4% of annual revenue, whichever is larger. We think this is actually the clients tell us this is a massive challenge for them, and so .governance is all about solving that. And then with the applications on top, whether you look at Watson Assistant, conversational AI with a large language model that underpins it, Watson Orchestrate, thinking about accelerating and automating any repetitive task. And by the way, we've used these products. So for instance, with Watson Orchestrate, we've reimagined IBM's HR processes. Just think of the productivity benefits. And more importantly, for me as a user, I get my answer right at the instant. I don't have to send an email, wait for a response, maybe 3 clarifications. 3 weeks later, I get something, right? So huge enhancements. And the last one with Watson Code Assist, that's all about accelerating the lives of developers. So a lot of people say, wait a minute, if you're generating code, does that mean my job as a developer is going to go away? Absolutely not. So just think about your backlog. Every developer has years, if not decades of backlog. What Code Assist is about is how do we help you become more productive by automating the things that are common. So if you have to write a login script, well, there's not a whole lot of innovation there. You can use Code Assist. So you can focus on your innovation in your business logic tier that is unique to your company, right? And so we started with support for Ansible. So you can go in with natural language, say, I want to do banana, I want to connect to a AWS resource with this database, and it will show you the Ansible code that will do just that. You just saw some announcements from IBM earlier this week about Z modernization, i.e. COBOL to modern languages. There's more coming on this front. So across what we call the Watsonx family, there's a ton of innovation, all powered by open source. The team of developers on my team are working on in open source, and then the education that will make you as a developer productive with these set of tools, but also just generally the set of technologies is something else we're delivering to the market.
I love that. I think it brings to the fore kind of this age of integration we're very much in at the moment, and particularly the focus you've brought out across hybrid, Gen AI and quantum. I couldn't agree more, but underpinning all this, it's that power of community and connection in terms of skills uplift and accessibility too. So I love the fact you've brought all those elements together. And I know we're getting short of time, but I wondered if I could throw in a final question. I think brings some of these elements together. So I have a series called 365, and it's very much kind of visibility of role models in tech or data or tech for good stories that can help kind of inspire people and say change the narrative on what careers in tech look like and get more and more people involved. So big passion of mine. And I wondered if a kind of final thought from you could be just a little share of, say, a moment that mattered or a project or an opportunity, you know, given some of the things we've talked about today, that we could share with the audience, again, more tangible ways to get involved. Obviously, call for code being right up there. We'll share all the details with everybody about that. But just again, just something that might inspire people to say, do you know what? I would like to go for that. I'm going to take that chance. I'm going to go for that course. I'm going to kind of click to commit and go for it. And do you know what? There'll be a place for you. I'd love to kind of bring that message to the fore. So anything like that might be a lovely way to wrap up our show today.
I think Call for Code is a great example of this, right? Because as you mentioned, you don't have to be a technologist, because part of the judging process is how are you able to explain the value of your technology that you've built, right? And what's the social good? What's the benefit to humanity as you deploy this? So I would encourage folks to take a look at the Call for Code webpage. Look at the videos of the winners. The backgrounds are very wide, right? It's not just I am a developer.
Exactly.
And it really starts with feeling uncomfortable, right? It's okay to feel uncomfortable, and that's why these courses are great, because you get to learn in a safe place, all self-paced. You'll make some mistakes. We all do. That's all right. But if you stick with it, you're going to learn a set of skills that you didn't have a week before you started. And that will help you feel more confident with the next challenge in terms of, okay, well, there's this new thing people are talking about in the Gen AI space. I'm going to go read about it. I'm going to go try a sample lab. The hardest thing is that first step. And we hear that from the Call for Code folks, especially the ones that are not developers. But taking that first step has immense benefits for you and frankly for society. So we really hope that you do that.
I love that. And what we'll do as well, there's a particular story, a gentleman I spoke to a couple of weeks ago, and he's actually just recently written about his experience and kind of the empowerment impact that this had on him from, you know, not just a tech perspective, but personal confidence and going for things, you know, and also the community of kind of peer-to-peer mentoring that evolves from this trip too. So anybody who might be thinking, well, I'd love to, but you know what, I'm not quite sure, totally understand that. But let's give you some more resources here and stories of people who've been through that process themselves and have come through and like all the benefits that's brought for them. So we'll bring some of those to the fore with this episode too, so that everybody can check that out and get more information, because I totally agree with you, Savio, an amazing opportunity, and it really does bring together, you know, the power of data and technology as a force for good for business and society at the same time. So very much kind of shared value. I think IBM Call for Code really is all about delivering across all of that.
Absolutely agree.
Oh, thank you, Savio. Thank you. Honestly, I could speak to you for longer, and I would love to kind of come back and revisit some of these themes. You know, with kind of the speed of change we have at the moment, I know we'll have an opportunity to do that, and there'll be even more to kind of reflect
Definitely.
on, and also the final iteration of Call for Code this year, of course, as well.
Well, let's plan on that. Absolutely.
Definitely. Let's do that. Thank you, Savio. Real pleasure to join you today, and thank you all for watching and listening in for another episode of Tomorrow's Tech Today with this very special feature. Thank you all.
Thank you.